Hey everybody, I am recording this video in the beginning of December, and I figured a fitting name would be a few of my favorite things, and I'm just going to show you some things that I find I use in Photoshop every single day. Okay, these are either a setting, a tool, or something that I just think is cool, and it's something that I use in my workflow all the time. So let's start off here with example number one, and that is pretty much all of the healing or retouching tools. You've got your spot healing brush, your healing brush, and then down here you've got your clone stamp tool. And these are all tools that are great for retouching and for healing. Well, all these tools have an option in the options bar called Sample All Layers. If I turn that option off, so let's say for example I want to do my retouching work on a separate layer. So I'll create a blank layer. Alright, and I'll select the clone stamp tool and I'll hold down the Alt key, option on the Mac to sample. I'll start painting. You see, nothing's actually happening, and that's because I'm on a blank layer here. If I turn on Sample All Layers though, let me zoom into this. I hold down that Alt key, option on the Mac, and I sample. Now I can start to paint away some of that area here. Okay, so what's this doing? Well, it's allowing me to work on a separate layer here. So now I can always drop the opacity down and kind of bring in some of that original skin texture and back. But you can see here when I hide the background layer, all my changes were done on a separate layer. So that's what Sample All Layers does. I turn it on every single time that I do any of my retouching work, and I do everything onto that blank layer because it lets me have that control. While I'm on the topic of some of the tools here, one of the things that I always do, because I'm always changing my tool settings either to demonstrate something when I'm speaking or just because I'm changing my tool settings to work. But one of the things that happens here, if you just right click or control click up here on the tool, up in the top options bar, it gives you an option to reset that tool or reset all tools. So if you want to, if a tool is not working for you the way you think it should, just choose to reset it. And that's just one of those things. I gotta say, I use it all the time because I'm always changing my tool settings. Okay, now let's take a look at another one here. And this is one that has to do with layer styles inside of Photoshop. And if I take a look inside the styles palette, you'll see a lot of really ugly styles. First of all, if I just look at the palette, you'll see a lot of really ugly styles, and you can click on the little flyout menu and you can see that there's not a whole lot better ones inside of that you can pick here. So what you can do is click the little jump over to image ready button here, and what I'm going to do is show you inside of image ready also has a styles palette, and in the styles palette is a lot nicer styles than some of the default ones that you'll find inside of Photoshop. So if I create myself a little button here and I click on the styles, you'll see you get some pretty nice ones compared to what you might have seen inside of Photoshop before. So you even get these dotted lines and some weird things that you just don't normally see when you're using the styles in Photoshop. For some reason, I don't know why, but the ugliest, most unusable styles are the ones that are loaded by default. But hey, that's the way it is, but that's one of the ways that you can go and you can get some new ones. Alright, another one that I use all the time is the feather setting here in Photoshop. So what I'm going to do here is just kind of reduce the size of the nose here, and whenever you select a selection tool, you'll see that there's a feather option up here in the options bar. My suggestion is always leave that at 0, because what's going to happen is you're going to get some really weird selection settings when you accidentally set that up higher than 0, and it's a bad thing. So what I do is I make my selection the way that I want, and then I feather it. So what we'll do here is we'll just make a quick selection, and I always feather a selection just because it kind of smooths out the edge and it gives me, I find, a much nicer result here. So if it's a low resolution image, depending on what you're doing, anywhere from 10 to 15 pixels when you're doing maybe some retouching work. Higher resolution image, you might want to double that. So now the only thing you see different here, I'll zoom in so you can see it. This is before and this is after. So it kind of smooths out the selection a little bit and just smooths the edges. And then I'll go a little trick here under the distort menu to pinch. And if I click on the filter, you can see that's before and that's after. So this is actually two little tips. I'm showing you the feather tip that I like to do here. And I always just basically, I almost feather every single selection I make when I'm retouching a photo because I generally don't want those harsh edges. But also, this is again, this is one of those things I use every single day, are a lot of the filters will let you click before, after. Okay, because you see there's no preview setting inside here. I do have a zoom, so I can really zoom in and I can really see what I want to see. So I can click on it to see the before image and then let the mouse go to see the after. And I can start to just kind of adjust, again, before, after. Hit OK, deselect, and that's a nice quick way to reduce the size of the nose. A couple of keyboard shortcuts I use constantly. The D key sets my foreground and background colors to black and white. X swaps the two. Okay, so even if they're not black and white, if they're two other colors, X will always swap those two colors here. And then D will get them back to their defaults. Now, another keyboard shortcut I use constantly. Let's say I create a selection. I want to fill that selection. This is one I use every single day, and I see so many people, I get questions on it because they'll see an instructor do it very quickly. But if I want to fill with the foreground color, I press the Alt and Backspace keys on the PC, and that's Option and Delete on a Mac. And it fills with whatever your foreground is. If I want to fill with the background color, I press Control Backspace or Command Delete on the Mac, and that fills with that background color. So a couple of keyboard shortcuts that I probably just really couldn't live without. Here's another one for you. And that is when I'm working with masks, I find I often want to use the same type of mask on a different layer. So here's a good example. I've added a hue saturation adjustment layer here. And what I did is I took the yellows and I brought the saturation down to go ahead and whiten the teeth. So here was before, that's with the teeth a little bit yellow, and here's after. Now they're whiter. Sometimes you want to take it a step further. Sometimes you want to do something else. So let's say we want to add a levels adjustment. And maybe we want to, what we did before is we took the yellow out of the teeth, but maybe I want to whiten them some more. So I can take my white slider here and bring that over to the left. I can click OK. The problem is, if I show and hide this layer, I've whitened the entire photo. Now I could go about the process of reselecting the teeth and putting it on the mask here, but again, one of my favorite things inside of Photoshop, and this is new inside of CS2, is the ability to drag a mask. So I can take this mask, I can drag it, it asks me to replace, and all I gotta do is hit yes. Now notice what it did, it moved it from here to here. So what you can do is hold down the Alt key on the PC, Option key on the Mac, click and drag, and see that little double cursor? That's going to copy it. I'll say yes to replacing it, and now I've just applied that same mask to another layer here. Again, just one of my favorite things. I use it constantly to speed up my work, and then I can always come into levels and adjust those settings again. So another one of my favorite things. All right, one more for you here, and that is the ability to create a new window of the same image that you're working on. So we can use the same image that we have here as an example, but a lot of times you'll be zoomed in on the image and I will start to, oh, by the way, when we're talking about my favorite things I use all the time, notice how I'm panning around the image. All I've got to do is hold down the spacebar key for that. And I get to just click and move around. So spacebar will automatically change you to this hand tool right here. So I click and I can move that around. And then I'll open up my hue saturation adjustment. A lot of times we'll start to work with our settings here and we'll see what it looks like when we're zoomed way in. But the problem is we don't really know how it's looking in context of the whole photo. So here's what you do. Go up to the view menu and then go over to window. So you got to go to view first and then go to window. No, you don't have to do that. What you want to do is go up to the window menu go over to Arrange and choose New Window for, and this will be whatever your image name is. And you see what that does? It creates a whole new window for it. If I grab my brush tool here, and I'm going to show you a bad example, and then I'll show you a good example. If I grab my brush tool and I just click and I start painting, see, it's changing it here and it's changing it here because it's really the same image. So the way this helps me is I can kind of tuck this off to the side. I can move my large version over here. I can open my hue saturation adjustment, and now I can make my changes and I can see them close up, but I can also see them in context of the entire image right over here. So again, that's called New Window, and you get to it right under the window menu, under Arrange, and it's the last option at the bottom of that list here. So it's a really good way when you want to see a close-up view and the full view side by side with each other, so you can always see your changes. Well, folks, these are indeed a few of my favorite things here inside of Photoshop. And as I mentioned in the beginning, they're just things that I used every single day. So I figured they're not things that I tried to think of, what can I do to fill a video. They're things that I really find help my workflow, help me work better and faster. So I figured I'd share them with you guys. Now, it is the beginning of December when I'm recording this, hence the name of the video. So I hope you all have a great holiday season and a great new year as well.